I was clearing out my desk drawers when Sarah walked into what used to be my office, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to my execution. She stood in the doorway for a moment, arms crossed, watching me pack 8 years of my life into cardboard boxes. "You don't have what it takes to run a business, little brother," she said, her voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked downtown Seattle. The same windows where I'd spent countless nights planning renovations, analysing occupancy rates, and dreaming of the day I'd finally prove myself worthy of the Thompson name. I looked up at her, this woman who'd shared Christmas mornings and family vacations with me, and all I could manage was a sarcastic smile. Because what else do you do when the person who's supposed to love you unconditionally tells you that you're worthless? "That's it?" I asked, taping up another box. No thank you for the 8 years, no acknowledgement of the 30% increase in occupancy rates. Just straight to the character assassination? Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her designer blazer. "Marcus, this isn't personal. This is business, and frankly, you've never understood the difference. My name is Marcus Thompson, and 24 hours ago I thought I knew who I was. I was the operations manager of Thompson Hotels, a family business built by my grandfather in 1963. I was the guy who showed up at 6 a.m. to handle guest complaints, who stayed until midnight reconciling accounts, who knew every employee's name from the housekeeping staff to the head chef. But according to my sister, I was none of those things. According to Sarah, I was just dead weight. The irony wasn't lost on me. Growing up, Sarah had always been the golden child, the one with the MBA from Harvard, the one who could charm investors over cocktails and close deals with a handshake. But while she was networking at country clubs, I was learning the hotel business from the ground up, starting as a night desk clerk when I was 16. "Do you remember," I said, placing a framed photo of our parents into the box, "when Dad used to bring us to the flagship hotel on Sundays? You'd spend the whole time in his office playing with the calculator, pretending to be a CEO, but I was downstairs helping Manuel fix the ice machines and learning why Mrs. Henderson in room 412 always requested extra towels." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Your point?" "My point is that while you were playing business, I was actually learning it." She laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Marcus, you've been handed a job you were never qualified for, working in a company you never had to build. Dad felt sorry for you, and so did I, but sentiment doesn't run hotels." The words hit harder than I expected, mainly because they echoed thoughts I'd had about myself for years. Was I really just the charity case brother, kept around because firing family looked bad? Had every promotion, every responsibility, every small victory been nothing more than elaborate pity? I thought back to when we were kids, growing up in the shadow of Thompson Hotels. Our father, Robert Thompson, had inherited the business from his father and built it from 3 properties to 12 across the Pacific Northwest. Family dinners were business meetings. Vacation conversations centered around renovation plans and market expansions. Sarah had always been Dad's favourite, even as children. When she was 12, she was already sitting in on-board meetings, taking notes in a little pink notebook and asking questions that made the executives nod approvingly. "That girl's got vision," they'd say. "Natural-born leader." Meanwhile, I was the kid who preferred spending time with the hotel staff. I'd hang out in the kitchen with Chef Rodriguez, learning about food costs and inventory management. I'd follow the maintenance crew around, understanding the mechanical systems that kept our guests comfortable. I'd sit with the front desk staff during busy check-in periods, watching how they handled difficult situations with grace and professionalism. But none of that seemed to matter to Dad. When Sarah graduated high school, she got a full scholarship to Harvard Business School. When I graduated, Dad sat me down for what I thought would be the talk about my future in the company. Instead, he said, "Marcus, not everyone is cut out to be a leader. There's honour in being a good soldier." A good soldier. That phrase had haunted me for years. Still, I'd persevered. I took a degree in hospitality management from the University of Washington and started working my way up through the company. Night desk clerk, day shift manager, assistant operations manager, and finally operations manager. Every step was earned through long hours and measurable results. Under my management, our customer satisfaction scores increased from 3.2 to 4.7 stars across all properties. I implemented a new booking system that reduced no-shows by 40%. I restructured our housekeeping protocols, cutting costs by 15% while improving room turnaround times. But Sarah saw none of that, or if she did, she never acknowledged it. The worst part was that I'd actually been excited when Mom died last year and left her shares to Sarah, making her the majority owner. I thought it meant we'd finally work as a team. I thought she'd see me as a partner rather than a burden. I was so incredibly wrong. Sarah had called a board meeting her first day as company president. I'd walked into the conference room expecting to discuss expansion plans or new marketing strategies. Instead, she'd handed me a termination letter. Effective immediately, Marcus Thompson's employment with Thompson Hotels is terminated. She'd read aloud to the shocked faces of our board members. We're restructuring the operations department to better align with our growth objectives. I'd sat there, stunned, as she continued outlining her vision for the company. Everything I'd built, every system I'd put in place, every relationship I'd cultivated with staff and suppliers, it was all being dismantled and reassigned to people she'd hired from outside the company. "You can't be serious," I'd finally said. "I'm completely serious. The company needs professional management, not family favoritism." Family favoritism. As if 8 years of 60-hour weeks and missed holidays and sleeping in my office during busy seasons was some kind of charitable handout. Now, standing in my former office, watching Sarah check her watch like my departure was just another item on her to-do list, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and immediate. But underneath it, something else was growing. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, sealing the last box with tape that made a harsh, ripping sound in the quiet office. "You actually think you're doing the right thing." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "I am doing the right thing. For the company, for our employees, for our guests. Sometimes leadership means making hard choices." "Leadership," I repeated, testing the word. "That's interesting. Tell me, Sarah, when was the last time you spent a shift working alongside our housekeeping staff? When did you last handle an angry guest at 2 a.m? When did you last review our supplier contracts line by line to find cost savings?" Her jaw tightened. "That's operational minutiae. A CEO needs to focus on strategy, not micromanagement." Or maybe a CEO needs to understand the business she's running. I picked up my boxes. 8 years of work reduced to 3 cardboard containers at Detroit. Det sitting very energid gidi. Chu da doktor. As I passed Sarah, she touched my arm, her voice softening for the first time since she'd walked in. Marcus, this doesn't have to end our relationship as siblings. We can still be family. I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. She was perfectly put together, as always. Expensive suit, professional makeup, hairstyled to convey authority. She looked every inch the successful businesswoman she'd always wanted to be. But I couldn't see my sister anywhere in that polished facade. Sarah, I said quietly, in 25 years, when have you ever treated me like family? When have you ever asked for my opinion, respected my expertise, or acknowledged my contributions? You've tolerated me, managed me, and now disposed of me, but you've never, not once, treated me like a brother. Her hand dropped from my arm. That's not fair. Neither is this. I walked out of Thompson Hotels that afternoon, carrying my boxes and something else. A strange sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since I was 16 years old, I didn't have to prove myself to Sarah. I didn't have to wait for Dad's posthumous approval. I didn't have to be the good soldier, following orders and hoping someone would notice my value. 3 days later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, scanning job listings on my laptop when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Marcus, this is Richard Hayes. We met briefly at the Pacific Northwest Hospitality Conference last spring. Richard Hayes, venture capitalist, known for buying underperforming hotel chains and turning them into boutique success stories. He'd approached Dad about acquiring Thompson Hotels a few years back, but Dad had refused to even consider it. Mr. Hayes, I said, closing my laptop, what can I do for you? Actually, Marcus, I'm hoping I can do something for you. I heard about your departure from Thompson Hotels. I also heard it wasn't exactly voluntary. Word travelled fast in the hospitality industry, apparently. News travels fast. It does when someone makes a mistake as big as letting you go, he said. Marcus, I've been watching Thompson Hotels for 5 years. I know where the real innovations have been coming from. The booking system improvements, the customer service protocols, the operational efficiencies, that was all your work, wasn't it? I felt a strange sensation in my chest, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Recognition. Validation from someone who actually understood the business. I did implement those systems, yes. And now Sarah thinks she can maintain that level of operational excellence with outside hires who've never worked in your properties, never built relationships with your staff, never understood your unique market position. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway, apparently. Marcus, I have a proposition for you. Can you meet me for lunch tomorrow? I think you're going to be very interested in what I have to say. After he hung up, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, staring out the window at the Seattle skyline. Thompson Hotel's flagship property was visible from where I sat, its Art Deco facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. I'd grown up in that building's shadow, worked in its halls, dreamed of one day leading it into the future. But maybe some dreams were meant to die so that bigger ones could be born. The Hospitality Industry Awards ceremony was held at the Grand Pacific Ballroom, the same venue where Thompson Hotels had celebrated its 50th anniversary 3 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me as I straightened my tie and walked through the entrance, flanked by Richard Hayes and the rest of the Apex Hospitality executive team. 6 months. That's how long it had taken to build what Sarah thought was impossible. "You ready for this?" Richard asked, his hand briefly touching my shoulder as we made our way through the crowd of industry professionals. I nodded, though my heart was racing. Somewhere in this room, Sarah was probably networking, accepting congratulations on Thompson Hotel's recent quarterly results, playing the role of the visionary leader she'd always believed herself to be. She had no idea that in 15 minutes, everything she thought she knew about her little brother was about to change. The months following my termination had been a whirlwind of activity. Richard's lunch proposition had been exactly what he'd promised. Very interesting. He'd been planning to launch a new hospitality venture for 2 years, but had been waiting for the right person to lead it. Someone with operational expertise, industry relationships, and the vision to compete with established players. I could hire any number of experienced hotel executives, he'd told me, over salmon and asparagus at the Metropolitan Grill. But they'd be bringing baggage from their previous companies, trying to replicate systems that worked somewhere else. You understand something they don't, that exceptional hospitality isn't about implementing corporate policies. It's about creating genuine human connections. He'd offered me complete operational control, a $50 million investment budget, and something I'd never had at Thompson Hotels. The authority to build something from the ground up my way. We'd started with acquisitions. 3 underperforming boutique hotels in Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver. Properties with great bones but poor management. Instead of gutting them and starting over, I'd applied the same philosophy I'd tried to implement at Thompson. Understand what makes each property unique, then enhance those qualities rather than homogenizing them. The Seattle property had been a 1920s Art Deco building that previous owners had tried to modernize with generic contemporary furnishings. We'd restored the original architectural details, sourced period-appropriate furniture, and trained the staff to provide service that matched the building's elegant heritage. The Portland location was a converted warehouse in the Pearl District. Instead of fighting its industrial origins, we'd embraced them, creating a modern boutique experience that felt authentically Portland. Local artwork, partnerships with nearby breweries and coffee roasters, and a rooftop garden that supplied herbs for our restaurant. Vancouver had been the biggest challenge, a struggling business hotel that was hemorrhaging corporate clients to newer properties. We'd repositioned it entirely, transforming it into a wellness retreat that combined business amenities with spa services, meditation spaces, and locally sourced organic cuisine. All 3 properties had exceeded occupancy projections within 90 days of reopening under the Apex Hospitality brand. But the real coup had happened just last week. After months of careful negotiations, we'd signed exclusive management agreements with 15 independent hotels across the Pacific Northwest. Properties that Thompson Hotels had been courting for years. Sarah had no idea, none of them did. "Ladies and gentlemen," the ceremony host announced from the podium, "please welcome this year's keynote speaker, Richard Hayes, founder and CEO of Hayes Ventures, and his special guest, Marcus Thompson, CEO of Apex Hospitality. I felt the ripple of surprise move through the crowd. Many of these people had known me as Sarah's little brother, the operations guy who worked behind the scenes at Thompson Hotels. The last they'd heard, I'd been quietly let go during a restructuring. As we walked toward the stage, I caught sight of Sarah at a table near the front. She was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her expression confident and composed. But as our eyes met, I saw something flicker across her face. Confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like fear. Richard took the microphone first. Thank you all for being here tonight. The Pacific Northwest hospitality industry has always been built on innovation, on people who weren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and create something new. Tonight, I want to introduce you to someone who embodies that spirit. He turned to me with a smile that held just a hint of mischief. 6 months ago, Marcus Thompson was unceremoniously dismissed from Thompson Hotels, where he'd spent 8 years revolutionizing their operations and driving unprecedented growth. Their loss, as they're about to discover, has become our industry's gain. The room had gone completely quiet. I could see people at Sarah's table leaning forward, straining to hear every word. Marcus, Richard continued, has done something that many thought impossible in today's competitive market. In just 6 months, he's launched Apex Hospitality, acquired and transformed 3 properties, and tonight I'm pleased to announce that we've signed exclusive management agreements with 15 premium independent hotels across Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. The murmur that went through the crowd was audible. I saw Sarah's face go pale, her hand gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. But we weren't done. Richard handed me the microphone and I stepped forward, looking out at an audience that included competitors, suppliers, investors, and former colleagues, many of whom had watched me grow up in this industry, who'd seen me dismissed as nothing more than nepotism in action. "Thank you, Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. 6 months ago, I was told that I didn't have what it takes to run a business, that I was dead weight, holding back progress through sentiment and family favoritism. I could see Sarah shifting uncomfortably in her seat, probably realizing that this wasn't going to be a gracious speech about new beginnings and industry partnerships. Tonight, I want to share something that I think this industry needs to hear. For the past 6 months, I've been operating under a cloud of uncertainty about my own abilities. Had I really been carried by family connections? Were my contributions to Thompson Hotel's success actually meaningful, or was I just the charity case brother kept around to avoid awkward family dinners? A few people chuckled, but the tension in the room was palpable. So I decided to find out. I took everything I'd learned, every system I'd developed, every relationship I'd built, and I started over. No family name, no inherited properties, no safety net, just the skills I'd developed and the vision I'd cultivated over 8 years of learning this business from the ground up. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the audience, making sure Sarah could see me clearly. The results speak for themselves, but there's something else this industry needs to know. Something about integrity and truth and the importance of recognizing where success really comes from. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder that had been burning a hole there all evening. 3 weeks ago, my father's attorney contacted me with some disturbing information. It turns out that the will I was shown after his death, the document that left me just 15% of Thompson Hotels while giving my sister 60%, was not my father's actual final will. The silence in the room was now absolute. I could see Sarah gripping the edge of her table, her knuckles white. The real will, filed with the state probate court just 2 weeks before my father's death, left me 45% of Thompson Hotels, with Sarah receiving 40% and my mother retaining 15%. The document I was shown was a fabrication created with the assistance of our family attorney, who has since been arrested for fraud and forgery. Gasps rippled through the audience. I saw several people at Sarah's table turn to stare at her, but she was looking down at her lap, her face flushed red. "But that's not all," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. Over the past 8 years, every major improvement at Thompson Hotels, the booking system that reduced no-shows by 40%, the customer service protocols that raised satisfaction scores from 3.2 to 4.7 stars, the operational efficiencies that cut costs by 15% while improving service quality. All of it was my work, implemented often over the objections of management. I opened the folder and held up a thick stack of documents. I have 8 years of emails, project reports, and performance metrics that document exactly who was responsible for Thompson Hotels' growth and success. And I have testimony from dozens of employees who can verify that while management was taking credit for results, they were often actively working against the changes that produced those results. Sarah finally looked up at me, and for just a moment I saw not the polished executive, but the scared little girl who used to hide behind our father when she'd gotten in trouble. "Now, I'm not sharing this information to embarrass anyone," I said, though we all knew that wasn't entirely true. "I'm sharing it because this industry deserves to know the truth about who drives innovation and success. It's not always the people in corner offices taking credit. Sometimes it's the people working 18-hour days, building relationships with staff and guests, and caring more about excellence than recognition." I folded the documents and put them back in my jacket. Apex hospitality exists because I finally realized that I don't need anyone else's validation to prove my worth. But I thought this industry should know that when you see Thompson Hotels' performance start to decline over the coming months, and it will, because the systems and relationships that drove their success are no longer there, you'll understand why. The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. I saw industry veterans I'd known for years standing up, and suppliers I'd worked with nodding approvingly. But my eyes were on Sarah's table where she sat frozen, looking like she'd been struck by lightning. As Richard and I left the stage, people crowded around us, offering congratulations and asking questions about Apex's expansion plans. But through the crowd, I could see Sarah making her way toward me, her face a mixture of desperation and anger. "Marcus," she said when she finally reached me, her voice barely controlled, "we need to talk." Do we? I asked, accepting a handshake from a long-time industry contact. I thought you made your position pretty clear 6 months ago. That was... She paused, looking around at the people still milling nearby. That was business. This is personal. Sarah, you taught me something very important when you fired me. You taught me that there's no difference between business and personal when family is involved. Every business decision is personal, and every personal slight has business consequences. She grabbed my arm, pulling me slightly away from the crowd. Marcus, please, can we just talk privately? There are things you don't understand, pressures I was under, decisions I had to make. Pressures? I laughed, but there was no humour in it. Sarah, you committed fraud. You stole my inheritance and then fired me to cover your tracks. What pressure could possibly justify that? The company was struggling, she hissed, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. Dad left us with massive debt, declining properties, and no clear succession plan. I had to make hard choices to save the business. By stealing from your own brother? By consolidating control with someone who had the vision to turn things around? I stared at her for a long moment, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. She genuinely believed her own story. In her mind, she was the hero of this narrative, making tough decisions to save the family business. The fact that those decisions involved fraud and betrayal was just unfortunate collateral damage. You know what's amazing, Sarah? Even now, even after being caught red-handed, you still think you were right. You still think you deserve credit for success you didn't create, built on money you stole, at a company where you fired the person actually responsible for the results you were taking credit for. We can fix this, she said desperately. We can work together. Combine our companies, share the market. Think about what we could accomplish as partners instead of competitors. I looked at her for a long moment. This person I'd shared a childhood with, whose approval I'd spent years chasing, whose respect I'd thought I needed to validate my own worth. Sarah, I said quietly, in 25 years, when have you ever treated me like a partner? When have you ever asked for my opinion, respected my expertise, or acknowledged my contributions without being forced to? You've tolerated me, managed me, stolen from me, and disposed of me, but you've never, not once, treated me like an equal. Her face crumpled slightly, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But what about family? She whispered. We're all we have left. Family? I repeated, tasting the word. You know, I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn a place in this family, trying to prove I was worthy of the Thompson name, worthy of Dad's respect, worthy of being your brother. But I finally realised something. I don't need to earn what should have been given freely. I looked around the ballroom at the industry colleagues who'd congratulated me tonight, at Richard who'd believed in me when my own family didn't, at the future I was building on my own terms. I have a family now, Sarah. I have a team at Apex who respects my leadership, investors who trust my judgment, and clients who value my expertise. I don't need the Thompson name anymore. I don't need Dad's posthumous approval. And I definitely don't need a sister who only wants me around when she needs something from me. I started to walk away, then turned back one more time. Good luck with Thompson Hotels. You're going to need it. As I rejoined Richard and our team, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace with my decisions. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder for family approval or waiting for someone else to validate my choices. 3 months later, I was sitting in my office at Apex's Seattle headquarters when my assistant buzzed in. "Mr. Thompson, there's a Sarah Thompson on the line. She says she's your sister?" I looked out my window at the city skyline, at the Thompson Hotel's property visible in the distance. Their occupancy rates had dropped 12% in the past quarter. 3 of their key staff members had joined our team. 2 of their biggest corporate clients had switched to Apex properties. "Tell her I'm unavailable," I said. "And in the future, Ms. Thompson should direct any business inquiries through our corporate development department." After my assistant hung up, I turned back to my computer, where I was reviewing expansion plans for our new property in Portland. We'd found a beautiful historic building that was perfect for conversion, and our design team had some incredible ideas for honouring its heritage while creating a modern luxury experience. There was so much work to do, so many dreams to build, so many people depending on me to get it right. But for the first time in my career, that responsibility felt like freedom rather than burden. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah. Marcus, please call me. We need to talk about the Portland property. There are things you don't understand about the market there. I can help." I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Have you ever been told you're not good enough by the people who should support you the most? Have you ever had someone take credit for your work, question your abilities, or make you doubt your own worth? Sometimes the best revenge isn't cruelty. It's simply proving them wrong on your own terms, building something better than what they said you could never achieve, and finally, understanding that you were never the problem. They were. And sometimes the greatest victory is realizing you don't need their approval anymore.